Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I'm TJ Hoisington, and in today's success interview, I was privileged to interview Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown is a leading authority and expert in the area of diversity and inclusion. In fact, she's written several books on the subject, including this one, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, which I read and learned a lot from. And we'll be talking about this in the interview, but she's also a well sought after keynote speaker. She's a force for good out in the world. She has her own podcast, and she's also the founder of Jennifer Brown Consulting, which is an organization that goes inside companies and organizations and help them create cultures of openness and understanding and respect. And one more thing, make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure that you click that notification bell so that you're the first to be notified when I come out with a new podcast, a success interview, or a success or inspirational message. That way you'll be the first to be notified. And besides, I would love to have you a part of my community. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. I'm really excited. Jennifer, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show. I've got to be honest. When your staff reached out to me and I read through a few things, I felt like this is taking me out of my comfort zone, right?
Yay! In a good way,
Totally a good way. But it just, hey, so I'm really looking forward to the interview. I feel like we all have a lot to learn, and there are insights. You and I had a quick phone call about a week ago in preparation for this interview, only to make sure that we were on the same page. And I felt like from that phone call, I felt your heart, and I felt the goodness that you have and the passion that you have. And I think that is a powerful thing. So let's jump right into it.
Yes, indeed.
So one of the things we like to do with all of our guests for these success interviews is start off with your story.
Yeah, boy, winding road as for many of us. So in my 20s, I'll start there. I wanted to really make a difference in the world. So I found my way to nonprofits, and I had every job under the sun in those great organizations. And I think I knew I needed to do purpose-driven work. It was really important to me. But I was also a singer on the side, and that was always a passion, but I never quite thought I could do it as a living. So I actually moved to New York and applied and got into a master's program at a conservatory and got a master's in vocal performance, and I studied opera. Right. And over the course of training for that, which I really wanted because I'd been a musical kid my whole life, and it was something I've like, what do I do with this talent and this passion? But sadly, I kept injuring my voice as a vocalist, and I had to get several surgeries. And you can recover from vocal surgery, but it's hard. Your vocal cords will never be as flexible as they might need to be, particularly with repeated surgeries. So I knew I needed to reinvent, and it was a really terrifying time. I felt like my passion was being kind of ripped away from me, and my mechanism really to communicate and my mechanism to express my purpose in this world, because it felt very personal. But the good news is I had lots of performer friends who'd had to kind of find another way. And things led me to what would become the second master's degree I have, which is in organizational change and leadership development in HR at Fordham University. And I would then recreate myself into the field of training and development, leadership, and get some corporate roles. And so I moved up in HR teams to director level. I got laid off. And then this was about 15 years ago. And I said, I think I need to be an external voice because I want freedom. I have issues with authority, so I kind of didn't want a boss, truthfully. I share that with you. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then so I hung out my shingle and I LLC'd, and I started to kind of do what I used to do internally, but from the outside. And it just felt amazing. I loved it. I loved facilitating trainings. I taught so many different soft skills classes. I was on my feet all the time. I was on planes. I was teaching things that I didn't really know. And then we pivot. The company sort of grew. I added to my team. We started to focus on diversity and inclusion, more specifically, because all during this time of being a performer and then becoming an entrepreneur, I am a member of the LGBTQ community. So I've been out since I was 22, and that was a while ago.
Okay.
However, I was closeted as a performer. I was worried about, what will happen to my career if I'm honest about who I am. And so it was a tough road, I think. And now I've sort of knitted all these pieces of who I am together, and I embrace them equally. And I'm the most aligned I've certainly ever been. And I've realized that our knowledge as a company can be utilized very effectively in furthering corporate strategies when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So that's what we do today. I have a team of 25. We work with Fortune 1000 companies. I get to keynote all over the world. I have 2 books. I get to use my voice, just not as a singer. And that is really, really profound. And life sorts all this out for you if you're listening and if you hang in there long enough.
Totally agree with that. It does sort it out, but you do have to be patient. I felt like when your team reached out to me, I immediately went to your website.
Yes.
And I thought we worked for the same company, right? Because
Really?
I noticed on one of the taglines you have on your website is, "We believe in unleashing the power of human potential, embracing diversity, and helping people and organizations thrive." So the words that stood out to me were unleashing the power of human potential, helping people, organizations, and thriving. And I just thought, wow, we obviously have some things in common. Do you find that most of what you are doing now is in the area of diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, but like you just said, actually, this is the human potential conversation. It's it's literally any of us who are passionate about leadership should be thinking all the time about who's most enabled to be leaders. Who do we see when we say the word leader? Does a certain kind of person come to mind and another one doesn't?
For sure.
Do we all have equal access to being a leader, whatever kind of leader we want to be? And that's where it gets really interesting, because I'd say, if you're not uncomfortable on a regular basis, you're not leading. And you should be seeking what's uncomfortable. And for a lot of the folks that we work with, the discomfort comes from difference. I think it comes from stepping out of, well, my life has been this way and I'm comfortable here at this workplace. And what do you mean other people aren't? What do you mean things are getting in their way? What do you mean they hear like comments and jokes that might make them feel discouraged and uncomfortable, or that sort of offend them on a personal level, but they don't feel like they can say anything? It's very interesting that 2 people can be having a radically different experience of belonging at work, of reaching their full potential based on who they are. And that's kind of where we're at. So leadership needs to be inclusive now. We have to, as leaders, kind of step up and say, so, what is everybody else's experience here? And be able to step out of our own lens and say, I want to care about that. I actually want to make sure that nobody feels they have the obstacles that I've never experienced. And that's a huge opportunity.
Well, and that is well said. I don't know of any person that couldn't agree with anything that you just said, right? Everybody should feel included. People shouldn't be marginalized. Right? Everybody has value. One of the things that I totally believe in, and for 25 years now, in terms of human potential, I've been in organizations really helping people unleash their greatness within. And that means all people. That means with all backgrounds, right? I'm a big believer that oftentimes it's not, and you might have a different stance on this, I don't know, but it's not, I argue that it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And we all come from different backgrounds, different circumstances. And I hope that my message is reaching out to people to teach, think big, push yourself, fight through it, be a victor, not a victim, those kinds of concepts. And, I just wrote down here, we believe that all people have value and individual worth. No matter where you come from, you can succeed. Everyone has a voice and they should express it. And that I also believe, I wrote down here, I just thought about it after reading your book, by the way. Here's the book.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Ooh.
How to be an inclusive leader.
Yay.
Your role in creating cultures of belonging where everyone can thrive. Love that.
Fab.
So I read through this. I spent all day yesterday going through it, taking, I don't know if you can see that.
Ooh, I love that.
Notes.
Oh, that makes authors so happy when you see things like that. Thank you.
I go through stuff and I think through it and I argue with myself and I try to truly, and that's what I love about visiting with you and having you on the show, is I felt like you come from a place of inclusive, of
I hope so.
pride.
Yes.
Right. Everybody matters. And I think messaging has a big role to play. So here's a question I have for you, because on one of the first videos I watched of you, it was the TEDx that you did.
Yes.
And you talked about bringing your whole self to work.
Right.
What does that mean, bringing your whole self to work?
Means different things for different people. And I think that's the important part of it. Well, it's become this mantra in the companies I work with, because we know that when we're comfortable at work and we feel we're relaxed and we aren't afraid or managing whether we belong or not, we actually do better work when we're creative. And that's so obvious, right? It's so intuitive. But I think when we say bring your whole self to work, bring your best or full self or whatever the word is, it is easy for some of us to do that, and it's not as easy for others. And that those of us it's not easy to do is when bringing your full self to work means that you're taking on some risk in terms of alienating people. You're the only one that has a certain identity and nobody's talking about it. And yet it's a really big part of who you are. So I'll just give you an example.
Okay.
50% of people who identify as LGBTQ are closeted in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So 1 in 2. And that's it. So imagine the lengths to which you have to go to have no pictures on your desk, to sanitize pronouns when you're speaking about loved ones, when you can't talk about what you did over the weekend. And I guess depending on if you're sitting on a certain side of the table, you might say, oh, please, everyone's fine with that now. Like, we're so beyond that, but we're not beyond it because 1 in 2 people are literally hiding who they love and who their family is on a day-to-day, hourly basis, literally. And if you can imagine what that feels like. Just imagine for all of our heterosexual listeners, using a same-sex pronoun to describe your significant other every single day and all the reactions that you would get at work. I mean, that's just a small sliver of what it feels like to walk through the world when you don't see anyone that looks like you. You don't hear anyone speaking comfortably about diversity and including that aspect of diversity. And so the result is then you have a lot of people who are hiding. And when you're hiding, there's no way you can show up with that executive presence. There's no way you can be fully present in a creative meeting, or come up with that next big idea. There's no way that your colleagues can feel they really trust you, because it's all about relationships in the workplace. And when you have to hide all of that stuff, you might get feedback that I don't really know them. I'm not sure I know, because we trust what we know. And if so many people are hiding because they're afraid of how you're going to react to who they are, you're definitely not going to feel that warm and fuzzy. And then you may not promote that person. You may not think of that person. You may not feel close to that person. So it's very insidious in terms of like the opportunity cost of all of this for so many people. And LGBTQ is just one example. I mean, I do a lot of seminars with women and female leaders who are sort of what we call covering all the time. So, wondering how to soften their message, say they have a strong opinion about something, but they know they're not going to be heard in a fair way. Like, they're going to be called angry or defensive when all they're being is emphatic, for example. Like, that's a very well-known double standard. So women engage in this. I would say people of color are walking around workplaces where there's not a lot of people of color, particularly in the executive level. There's almost none. So you're sort of, and then if you're multiple things, right, at once, then you have this calculation to do, which by the way, this all takes tons of energy, tons.
Oh, it does. Well, and it does, right? For the heterosexual group too, because they've got to figure out
who's not telling me who they are and like what's getting in the way of their performance?
For
right?
sure. I listened one of your podcasts you had with Rob Smith, founder of the Fluid Project, which I thought was a great interview. And I thought he came across really well. He said toward the end, I may misgender someone at some point, something to that effect. And I give you permission to correct me. We have to be open to. So I just think it takes a lot of energy as I travel and visit with groups and so forth. It's a new, in a sense, it's not really a new world, but it's a new, in many respects, it is more real probably in the workplace probably now than it's ever been before.
And it's not going away. So the demographic change is massive and it's here to stay. And so now we have Gen Y, millennials are the dominant generation from a numbers perspective in the workplace. So that's a sea change. And then when you think about how diverse that group is, right, in every conceivable way beyond gender and ethnicity, and there's major like mental health issues for Generation Z in particular, where they're going to be bringing their full selves to work, right? Because this is our mantra. And this is good. It's actually good for business. We need to see full people. We don't want people to sanitize themselves. Like that's actually not great for business and for innovation and all the other things. But so we're coping with a huge change. And these younger generations really prize inclusive-ness. It's a world that they've grown up with. And then they come into these corporate spaces and they're like, what is wrong with these people? Like, they seem to be totally clueless. Nobody's talking about this when I just came out of school where everybody's talking about it. They don't understand what allyship is, which we can talk about that today if you'd like, but it doesn't just mean like, you don't just have to be a diverse person to be supportive. A lot of people in the younger generation, no matter how you identify, this is a generational value that's across the board. So you've got this group coming in and then they're like, wait a second, we have to go to mandatory diversity training. Like, why do I have to be taught how to value other people? And they value themselves more fully, I think, than our older generations did, where we had to engage in a lot of behaviors to sort of hide. Like, just ask any woman who wore like the duck ties and the shoulder pads in the 80s. Like, you had to conform or die. Like, that was the only choice. And now we have, so many people coming in and wanting to be asked their pronouns, as part of the opening team meeting. It is
so
really different.
let's pause there, and just for the listener's sake, because I asked this on the call. Because it was new to me.
I love that you asked.
Oh my goodness. So help us understand the whole pronoun. I think I heard somewhere as I was studying, we don't call it preferred pronoun anymore or something like that.
That's right.
Okay, something. Right. So I'm trying to learn.
Thank you.
What? Yeah. Explain that, because when I went to your website, one of the first things I did was go to the about page, and then I looked at all your team members, and underneath all their pictures is their name, and then the pronoun that I assume they prefer being
referred to with. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so some of them I got them here. So you have underneath some names you have she, hers, she, her, hers. While for someone else, it may be they, them, their, and vice and so forth. So just explain that, would you?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay. So in the old days, I think we, including me, mostly understood sexual orientation, right, as a continuum of identity, gay, straight, and bi, and all these other things, but it's a continuum. We called it LGBT and we put it on a binary, like you're either gay or not. But it was identity's never really been a binary. It's just been a sort of shortcut to make it easier. But that's never been true. And so identity is always a continuum, not a binary. And so sexual orientation is your romantic affiliation, right? The gender of the person you want to, fall in love with, be with, create your life with. And then gender identity is totally different, actually, which most people don't understand. And gender identity is also a continuum, but they kind of live this way.
Okay.
They're not the same. They're actually two different continuums.
Okay.
And everybody can be at different places on each of these. So for me, I'm in the LGBT community, and I choose to have my life, with my partner of 20 years, Michelle. But on the gender binary and the gender expression continuum, sorry, not binary, I identify as very feminine presenting. So my gender identity is very, it's called cisgender, which is the opposite of transgender. So cisgender means that I was born in a body whose gender matches my sense of my gender. My sense of my gender is a woman, and I was born in a woman's body. So that means I'm cisgender. Cis means same in Latin. And then the opposite end of the continuum is trans. And then in the middle, there's gender non-binary or gender fluidity. You mentioned the Fluid Project and Rob Smith the other day. That's gender neutral clothing. So that was the guest that I had on my podcast.
Yep.
So gender neutrality or fluidity or non-binary is exactly that, which is it's somewhere in this continuum between the binaries. And what we're learning about identity now that we have a lot more science and physicians and not everybody wants to have surgery. Not everyone wants to transition completely. They may want to live in the middle, and that's where they're comfortable. And so it's interesting for pronouns because my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Okay.
Yours might be he, him, his.
It is.
And
that's right.
Yep. And my friend Kat's are they, them, theirs.
Okay.
Because Kat identifies as non-binary. So anyway, it's just it's an interesting and challenging time, and I don't think it's going to slow down.
It is because I think of the books that I write, right? Does that, how far does it go, right? Because it's just a new world to think
it's a
through.
New world.
So that we're being respectful of everyone, right? That's the end goal.
That is, and I would say, so managers will ask me often, okay, Jennifer, I get it. Or my kids identify as non-binary, or my kid has a friend who's trans. I mean, more and more kids are coming home to the dinner table, bringing this to our dinner table. Like it's happening. And then it's happening in our workplaces too, in our teams. So what we don't want to do, like you referenced earlier, is misgender folks by assuming that what we think we see as their gender is actually correct. Because they may not identify as that. And so the thinking is that we want to inquire and create a safe enough space for people to share that should they choose to. So what it sounds like is if I'm a new manager, I might say, hey team, I'm really excited to get this project going. Like maybe I've put together a team. Let's start with, our introductions. I'll go first. My name's Jennifer. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Next, like literally just nothing, like, easy, part of our day-to-day. And then, it's not a force to have everybody do the same, but it is an indication that I'm trying to be an inclusive leader, that I am not presuming that everybody shares my identity just because that's my identity. And that's what's called, just to throw a really big word, when we assume everybody's heterosexual, it's called heterosexism. It's meaning that it never even crosses your mind. So when you meet somebody that looks like a man, you assume they identify as a man, and you also assume they might have a wife or a girlfriend. So you might say, oh, so what does your wife do? And then that puts a person in a tough position to have to come out to you if they want to and if they trust you, right? If you're a client, if you do business all over the world, it's it's very risky to actually come back to that and say, actually, let me correct you or hear whatever. So anyway, people just go silent. They don't say anything. And then, not saying anything turns into months and years of not saying anything, to the point where you've created an entire lie about who you are. And then you have this giant decision to make at some point in your career to say, hey, by the way, I've been lying to you for all these years. This is who I really am. We don't want to put people in that position.
So do you expect everyone, like, would I go in and say, provide my pronoun? Is this everyone should be doing it kind of a thing?
Well, I mean, if you've got younger people on your teams, you've got to know that this is one aspect of language and identity that they're pretty comfortable with. And when you are not comfortable with it, or it seems that you don't know anything about it, they may just notice, like, oh, okay, this person is of an older, don't you love this okay boomer stuff? I've been reading about it online. So interesting. But it's literally like, okay, so maybe this manager isn't quite informed. And I don't know if as leaders we can really afford, the only kind of leaders leadership is the kind of leadership that's received, that's actually followed. Like, that's all that matters. Perception is reality. It's not, oh, I'm a great leader and I think I'm a great leader. It doesn't matter like what everybody else needs. I'm going to enact leadership in the way that I was taught. Like, right. That is a very dangerous place to be. And I'm not saying morally, this is not a moral, I mean, I think it's a moral argument, but it doesn't need to be. It's literally, to me, how do you want to generate followership? How do you want to enable your colleagues to feel welcomed, valued, respected, and heard? Right. And do you want to be that person that creates that dynamic or not?
So I imagine in many of the or at least in some of the organizations you go into, that there's probably some pushback. Is there? Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because in the training, the corporate training we've done for many years and still do, I've got to be honest. We talk about brainstorming norms that aren't serving the organization, or we go through these exercises where we talk about processes and so forth that are impacting culture or are limiting the effectiveness of employees and so forth. And I've got to say, when I was reading your book, as I was reading it, I thought, I agree. I agree with the base principle, right, of inclusion and being respectful and kindness. And there's actually specific words that you used in here that I want. Everyone should go read it, because you have a lot of information in here that just it does open your eyes to some different things. I feel like there are some people that are probably in these teams and these organizations that struggle with having them to accept this. And I get that we need to, because every human has value.
Right. And we can't afford to leave any of that human on the sidelines when it comes to making sure we are responsive to the world that we live in, the world that we do business in, the world that we hire from. It's sort of not a winning strategy to sort of say, well, I don't care about this because I think I can hire without knowing about this. I can hire without looking at my processes. I can build great teams and not think about diversity of thought and how that sort of creative abrasion happens in order to create a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. So it's a choice for sure. And you can sort of say, well, I think I do this anyway as a leader. I'm inclusive. I don't need to read the book. I think a lot of people actually think they're great at this.
I'm sure you're right. Yeah. But when I've done the training over the years, I just thought we've done a lot of what you've talked about in the book in terms of the core principle, to the point it blows me away that the whole concept of gender or sexual orientation, if I'm saying that right, I apologize. If
you are. They're different. Yep. Good job.
Okay.
Good job.
It's never come up, and maybe it's because you said on one of the phone calls that 1 in 5 people. What was the wording?
Don't 1 in 5 people under the age of 35 identify as not straight and not cisgender.
Okay, so maybe in these meetings that we have, we talk about respect in the workplace and all these different things, but it's never been brought up specifically as a talking point.
I think the reason it's not coming up, there's a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of fear to bring it up. If you feel you've been left out of the conversation, nobody listens to you. I've had the experience as a woman of being in many meetings where I'm the expert and I'm the most senior person in the room, but everybody responds to things I say by looking at my male colleague. Like literally it's like,
I got you.
Or being spoken over, or having ideas stolen, or feeling that you can't jump in because the extroverts are sucking up all the air in the room. There's all kinds of meetings are perfect petri dishes for inclusion and exclusion. They are great examples of places where so many exclusionary behaviors are sort of allowed to happen unless somebody's actually noticing them. And so if you said you do a lot of sort of consulting on what's effective brainstorming, but brainstorming is only as good as people's comfort in bringing themselves to that table and to being heard. And if somebody's feeling smaller than because of their difference of identity, and they feel smaller than in general in the company, and they're maybe the only one at the table, or even in the company or at their level, that person is, I can promise you, is sort of probably wrestling with, how much do I say? And do I belong here? And will I be listened to?
I believe that there are, of the thousands of people we work with in a given year, for example.
Yeah.
There are people that feel that way outside of the sexual orientation or gender issues. I mean, people in many respects are just afraid to share their ideas that there might be some form of reprisal at any level.
True.
And so encouraging the listeners, you have to be willing, and step in here if you have a different take on this or whatever. You have to be willing. You've got to have courage to be a force for good. You have to have courage to stand up. And if, for example, if you prefer to be referred to as a pronoun, they, them, their, you've got to make that known. And understand at the same time that might throw some people off, and that might be a little different for some people because of their belief system, their map of reality. Right. And so both sides, would you agree with this? Both sides need to be patient with each other.
I agree with that. I think, and there's a lot of, we like to say calling in versus calling out. So I don't know if your listeners would know what call out culture is.
Okay.
Call out culture is the, unfortunate, it is when people are publicly shamed for saying the wrong thing when it comes to everything we're talking about. And maybe doing that in Twitter, maybe calling out, a CEO who's trying to make remarks about, diversity and how important it is. It can happen in a lot of ways. And it is very, I think, really harmful. What we like to say instead is calling in. And the calling in energy is, hey, can we have a conversation about this? Maybe we can share stories. Maybe, I can share some about my life and you can share about yours. And, we can come to a greater understanding so that we can both be respectful and maybe know what we don't know. And so much of the book is about kind of making sure that as you're learning that you're creating a safe circumstance for learning for yourself.
That's
so
really
that if you make a mistake, you have somebody who has your back. Like if you would just ask me, like, Jennifer, how should I use this language? Like, that's a great question. I am so happy to guide you on that.
Yeah,
and I'm the perfect person to teach you. So I think the important thing is, don't make me, Jennifer, like do all your work, like, do some reading yourself.
Yeah.
Try to sort of consume media that shares about certain communities of identity that I have.
Listen to this podcast, listen to your podcast,
exactly,
listen to others' podcasts. Okay.
Totally. So, and then once you sort of step out and you say, do the right thing. So maybe you, as my ally, you're in a meeting, you're a coworker of mine, you notice that I'm getting spoken over a lot, or you notice that normally I'm really opinionated, but I'm being really quiet. What you could do is say, I know, Jennifer, you have some great ideas about this. Like, so hold on a second. Jennifer just made that point, and I want to redirect this back to what she said.
Right.
So you can constantly be, when you're an ally to those who have less of a voice because of unconscious bias, because that's happening all the time. When you become sensitive to that, you can actually play referee for all that stuff. And you lessen my work, which would be, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling heard. I'm just going to sit back. Oh, I'm never heard. Like I'm never taken seriously. I'm going to leave this company because nobody ever listens to me. And there's so much unconscious bias and nobody's noticing, let alone helping me. So unless I say something, like nothing's going to be said. And I think that's what leads to that like hopelessness. And I think that leads to retention issues.
It does connect to retention issues. I heard that loud and clear.
Yes, for sure.
So I just want to say, everyone should be doing what you just said anyway, regardless of where you come from.
True.
And I love it when I see in our meetings where someone will be a referee for someone that probably has lost, Stephen lost their voice. Stephen Covey said in his book, The Eighth Habit, when I was reading your book, it was drawing me back to Stephen Covey's book, The Eighth Habit, where he said two things: find your voice and inspire others to find their voices. And then he goes on to say, you are either finding or expressing your voice or you have lost your voice. Quote, the path to mediocrity straitjackets human potential. The path to greatness unleashes and realizes human potential. Voice is powerful, and everybody should have a voice and should be able to express it. I'm a huge believer in that.
I love that.
All right, I know that we're looking at, well, not too close, but we're coming up on time a little bit, and I feel like I got so much to go over. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I did hear last night. I just happened to flip on the TV, and Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, said, "We live in a world that's addicted to being offended." As I was thinking over the past week and studying these concepts, which I think are important, I really do. I think all people have value, and we got to respect and be kind. I think kindness is king, kindness is queen, kindness is the right way to be. To me, you can't argue that every one of us can be more kind at all levels. But I do wonder if we live in a victim kind of culture a little bit. Any thoughts on that? Just how to be balanced a little bit?
Yeah, well, I like to counsel the young people I work with who are new, say in corporate America, or they're emerging leaders, so they're high potential leaders, that valuing ourselves starts with us. Like if you are different, if you are underrepresented, if you have been marginalized, if you do hear what we call microaggressions, which is a word that's important for you, I think your audience to like look it up. It's the little comments and jokes and things that we have traditionally thought were really innocuous, but that actually are sort of usually offensive relating to somebody's culture. And I do think that our language has a ton of bias in it that we probably could stand to improve. I mean, that is a fact. It's a fact.
Yep.
So, I hear teenagers sometimes, "Oh, that's so gay." I mean, think about how that feels to hear. And I've had those conversations in my own family, and they're, "Oh, I just mean it's funny. Oh, I just mean it's strange." Yeah. Okay. So
but the receiver may not.
Okay. So, so anyway, so I think those young leaders that I try to counsel to say, celebrate all of who you are, and in living authentically and bringing your full self to your workplaces, you are going to create positive change. And I know that that's really difficult for some of you because you look around, you don't see anyone that looks like you. Maybe you work for a company where you look at the senior leadership and there's nobody that in an obvious way shares your identity. So what we think when we're at that level looking up is, oh, there's no chance for me to get there. There's just there's nobody that has done it. And therefore the sad thing and the tragic thing is that we sort of surmise then that there's no way I can make it.
No way. I think if you think you can, defy, my thought is defy the odds. I mean, go after it.
Yes.
Don't believe.
Don't give into that.
Possible. Don't give into that. Don't succumb.
I know, but that's not what, if people don't have people like you and me in their lives, where are they going to hear that message? Like, how are they going to be strengthened through mentorship to say, no, you are actually so talented and you can be the first and you can crack through that ceiling and you can be all those things, even though you don't see them, you can be them. And I think that's it's easy for you and me because we're so confident. But there's so many people that are like that when you pick up this vibe, you sort of internalize it, and it results in you playing smaller. It results in self-doubt. It results in imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you've talked about on your show. The imposter syndrome is not equally felt. Imposter syndrome lives, I think, more commonly in anyone who's underrepresented, because you're literally like the first person that you've ever seen. And you sort of feel like you're hanging on tenuously to everything you accomplish. Like, it's almost like, oh, I'm not sure I even belong here. So, but even though you've earned your place there, you are always doubting whether you belong there, or you're sort of having to be like 150% perfect and have like 10 times the qualifications, because you also are representative of an entire group of people that has never been at that table before. So it's very intense. Like, this is not a joke. And I know it's hard for people to understand, and you just have to believe me, I guess.
But
this is something that happens to us, and I can speak from personal experience that I've literally studied how men behave in business, and I have emulated it. I have copied it. I have practiced it, because I have lacked role models, and I have had struggled with the imposter syndrome and whether I belong. And so, but that's me, like lucky me, I was supported to do that. I happen to look a certain way that's acceptable, in the business world, whatever, like it. So I have things going for me that make my journey a bit easier than a lot of other people. And I'm still saying, as a published author, as a major keynoter, I still have those moments where I play too small because I don't think I saw anyone living the life that I'm living. And I honestly, I didn't, particularly women who were at the level I'm at now. So I think a lot about how I can be visible for others because that wasn't something that I had.
Wow, you were really authentic there to be really real. I love it. Okay, so a couple thoughts.
Yes.
I learned early on that sarcasm splits the spirit in half.
Oh, wow.
Sarcasm is, I've taught my children that it's never okay.
I don't like it either.
I'm
so in agreement with you.
I don't like it. When someone is trying to be funny and sarcastic to me, I feel like sarcasm eats at the lowest common denominator. And so that's number one. Just a quick thought I had. Another thought I had was, as you were talking, is I wrote a chapter in one of my books, The Secret of the Slight Edge, said, if you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't.
Oh.
Think about that. If you are what you do, when you don't, you aren't. Here's my point. If you base your happiness and fulfillment in life based on the results you can create, if that's the basis of your happiness, I got news for you. You'll probably be unhappy a lot of the time, right? Happy people are people that are grateful people, that are abundance mindset people, that have the tendency to look for the good, not the bad. And I remember early on, Dr. Phil, once taught, he says, people treat us based on our own behavior. So I think in the later portion of your book where you talked about messaging and getting people to align with you, but doing it respectfully and calmly is the way I would say it, is really important. Now, here's a quick question I have a little pushback on. I'm not sure that I do, though. So you're going to help. You're going to help educate me.
Sure.
So in our society, we're taught that anybody can achieve their dreams if they just work hard enough. That's the American dream, right? Or the meritocratic mindset is often reflected in the workplace. But you say in How to Be an Inclusive Leader, you say meritocracy is a myth. Now, let me pause you before you answer this, because I had to read that portion of the book several times. The term privilege came up. So based on my research this week, probably more than ever before, I realized I'm a person of privilege.
And so am I.
But it's a definition thing, right? Simply, if nothing else, simply because I'm a white male. Therefore, I've been blessed with certain opportunities afforded to me that that others weren't afforded. My question is, life isn't fair. For example, I came from a family of 8 children. My dad was in the Army. Growing up was always financially tight. I did not have a silver spoon in my mouth. But when I locked on the idea by listening to a tape starting at 15 years old of a motivational speaker named Jim Rohn, who was Tony Robbins' first teacher, Jim Rohn. I was laying in my bed and he taught me that I could be anything that I wanted to be, that I didn't need to allow my circumstances to define my reality.
Right.
And so I remember taking that and looking at my circumstances. So this is where I was. My circumstances, I felt like were here, but my ideal vision of where I wanted to be was up here. And between that, we call cognitive dissonance, right? So, it in this space creates a lot of energy and power and motivation to either move toward the desired ideal or to resort to the old or the current or whatever. And
or maybe the victim,
or the victim or the victim.
Right.
So I wrote here, I actually printed out this out of my book, If You Think You Can. As I said, I didn't say this in the book, but I wrote on the side, some people were born with circumstances where they received privileges that they didn't create. But the flip side, and this is what makes America great, is that you can start out with nothing in this country and make something of yourself. And I got stories and stories and stories over the years of people who came to, immigrants that came to the country with 10 cents in their, 50 cents in their pocket and became millionaires, and unbelievable opportunity. And I write in the book, quote, true achievers make the habit of not sitting around waiting for their break. They create it. They take action. Howard Schultz, Starbucks coffee founder and chairman, asked, what distinguishes the talented person who makes it from the person who has even more talent, who doesn't get ahead? Part of what constitutes success is timing and chance, but most of us have to create our own opportunities and be prepared when we see the big ones that others can't see. I just want to encourage all listeners, and I've given your take on this in terms of meritocracy. There, I get from the definition, I'm a person of privilege, but on the flip side of that, I feel like I wasn't a person of privilege, right? Right. Because I came from a little bit more of a difficult upbringing, and I was able to kind of fight through that. And so, where's the balance there?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about this because it's where a lot of people are stuck. The word privilege, first of all, has been a bit weaponized. Right. So even I have felt that.
Okay.
When I'm honest about I had a very different background than you, even though maybe somebody would lump you and me together based on what they see. But actually, you and I are vastly different from a socioeconomic diversity perspective. Okay. Right. So you and I are diverse in that way.
Okay.
We have traditionally talked about diversity a lot as gender and ethnicity based, because those were the underrepresented demographics in the workplace and still are. And many programs have been oriented around that. So when you say the word diversity, those are the things that come up, like affirmative action will come up, for example. But now the way we talk about diversity is literally all the nuances of other kinds of diversity, like the one I just said between you and me. You know, we are both white, and we may be both cisgender, I'd say, but we have socioeconomically incredibly different kinds of families. And so that when I open up to say everyone has a diversity story, I would invite, if you were an executive in one of my rooms, you know, you would have shared what you just shared. And I've had Jewish executives say, I'm on a Christian dominated management team, and I'm in a part of the country where that's what our company, that's the predominant religious value here. And, you know, we therefore, like when my company scheduled a meeting over my high holidays, and I went home to my wife and I said, should I say anything? Like, it didn't occur to anybody. And we decided that I wouldn't say anything, you know, and I just went back to work and skipped my holidays. Like, so it's just that extra sensitivity to who's in the room that is often invisible. So we talk about visible diversity and invisible diversity. For me, being LGBTQ, it's like something I can choose to hide or to share. And oftentimes when I share it, I feel like I'm sort of out on a limb and I'm taking a really big risk, because I feel like I could hurt my credibility. I could hurt my ability to be listened to. You know, and I know you wouldn't support that as my friend, as my colleague, as my boss. You'd be like, no way. Like, Jennifer's got the goods. But the problem is not everybody's aligned with you. And I know that. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to minimize it and hide it. Anyway, but I'm a person of privilege, many privileges. And I think funny enough, all of us have privilege, actually.
Right.
No matter who you are, you've got some, I say to my diverse audiences where there's a lot of like Black and brown faces, I'll say, look, you're in this room today. Like, the fact that you could take a day off and come listen to a speaker like me means that, like, some company is paying your salary and you didn't have to leave your hourly job and come and listen to me and risk your job. Like, so anyway, it's so universal. And instead of weaponizing privilege as something to be ashamed of, the way I talk about it is that my privileges, and I would define that maybe as the things that have been relatively easier for me in my life. So you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. But the fact is, though, that as you looking like you went through the world, people were relatively perhaps more comfortable with you being a leader and being an author because they've seen you before, right? Yeah. So you're not unusual from a demographic perspective. So when you put an idea on the table, people are going to be like, of course, we believe you, totally. So anyway, and you're very charismatic, you're confident, you're an extrovert, you're a tall man, even height has a lot to do with our believability. Anyway, so the things that you might say, well, I earned it all. I would argue, yes, you totally closed that gap, but you had some helping factors, just like I had some helping factors. And I can still get into rooms and tell the truth and challenge people in a much easier way than somebody that doesn't look like me. I can literally say the same exact thing, but I can make that point. So that, to me, privilege comes with an opportunity to get into rooms, to say things, to challenge a peer, to take a risk on the part of somebody that needs some help being seen and heard. And it's just very simple. It's actually good leadership. To your point, it's noticing, where can I maybe intervene here? Where can I point something out? Where can I maybe just take somebody aside and make them aware of what they're saying, what they're doing, that they probably don't even mean to be harmful and exclusionary, because so many of us don't see ourselves operating. We don't see the blind spots in our own leadership.
That's right.
So we need that reflective mirror. And it would help me as a woman in the room when you're in, for you to say, hey, like, why aren't there any, we're interviewing all these people for this new role. Like, there's no women on this list. Right. Like, and that would be great for you to point out, instead of me to have to always be the squeaky wheel to say, hey, where are the women? Where are the women? Where are the women?
That's valid.
Like, do you think this is smart? Like, should we really, like, when we have like 15% women at VP and up in this company, and there's no women being considered at all of these like talent reviews or interview processes, like, that should be concerning just from a demographic perspective alone. And if you notice that, it's more powerful than if I notice it.
That's right. And we're moving into a world and into a future where more of this is going to be a priority. So,
that's right.
So this is great. Listen, I know that your message, and this is why I had you on the show, I just felt the connection to you. I feel like what you're doing, what you're striving to do is a positive thing, is a good thing to bring awareness around these issues. First of all, everyone, her book is How to Be an Inclusive Leader. Make sure that you go to Amazon or go to any bookstore where it's located and get your copy. Is there anything else that you would like to give direction to, your website, or how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say I did the audiobook myself. So, and I used to do voiceovers. So if you like the sound of my voice, feel free to
sing. Do you sing it?
I used to.
No, I'm with you.
No, I kind of can't, but that's okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So that's great.
And then let's see. So I have a first book. If you like this one, you might want to rewind and read Inclusion, which was my 2017 book.
Okay.
Which was my first. And then I have a podcast called The Will to Change. It's on iTunes and anywhere you digest your podcast content. And then on social, I'm at Jennifer Brown on Twitter. I'm at Jennifer Brown Speaks on Instagram, and Jennifer Brown Consulting on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you're curious about our consulting services or me as a keynoter, which I do a lot of and I really enjoy, please drop us a line at info@jenniferbrownconsulting.com.
Perfect. It was great to have you on the show. And I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg. All right. Well, I'll let you go.
Read the book.
For sure. Make it a great one. And I wish you continued success.
Thank you.
So what'd you think of the interview? I thought I would just jump in here real quick and leave some concluding remarks, because I know some of you in my community are probably wondering, why, TJ, why did you do this interview? And I've kind of explained that in the interview, but I just want to leave some final remarks on it. First of all, Jennifer was great. I think she comes across well. I think she's just a class act altogether, and I enjoyed interviewing her and getting to know her better. She's opened my eyes to some things, but let me tell you something. I'm not endorsing any particular ideology. Here's what I am endorsing. I'm endorsing kindness at all levels. I'm endorsing respect. You see, I come from a place where I believe that we have a Heavenly Father, a God, who loves all of His children. So next time you go into the office, here's my hope by you listening to this interview. I hope you enjoyed it, by the way. I hope you'll give me a 5-star rating on it. I hope that you saw some value in it. And I hope that when you go to the office tomorrow or today, whenever you watch this, or you're in a group of people where maybe there's someone that you don't share a certain philosophy with, that you'll just have respect for them, that you'll have kindness, right? It doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything, but you know what? When we work together, we live together, just as Jennifer pointed out, it's important that we all show some kindness and some respect. Nobody should be marginalized. Nobody should be feeling like their voice isn't heard, right? You have greatness within no matter where you come from, all right? I hope that makes sense, and I hope you got something out of this interview. All right, now go out there and unleash your greatness within. Hey there, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you did, could you do me a favor? It would mean the world to me if you could write a simple review or give me a star rating. I would really, and I mean really, appreciate it. Thank you in advance. Now go out there and unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com